Don in London, hello. December the 30th, almost the end of the year. My videos all about recovery from addiction to either substance and behaviour. So my addictive substance was alcohol, I think it's still caffeine, and my behaviour could be equally addictive, and most often was around people, places and things. People wanting to be included, obsessively trying to get it right. Places, always wanting to be in the right place at the right time, and realising these days that often I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time. And things, collecting. And like I said yesterday, one of the things about this time of year, sale time, January sales, you name it, I could be out there buying things I just didn't need. And I didn't really want, but I bought them anyway, and they sat somewhere for a long time and never used, and then I gave them away. So, in recovery, one day at a time, sober today, sober this morning. How did that happen? Well, simply, I was kept alive long enough to have a moment of clarity, and I owe a debt of gratitude. Well, it's not actually a debt. I just am grateful for the help I got from family, friends, community and professionals along the way, reviving me when I was beyond the pale. And then I found fellowship, or it found me. I don't know which way around it was. I think I owe, again, gratitude to my sister who pushed me in the doors of AA, saying, go in there and sort yourself out. And I didn't. It took me quite a few years to get there again, and even then it was a rocky start. I was a very poor student, but that's good in a way, because if I was a poor student it meant I had lots of room for manoeuvre to keep on learning how to be sober. And the Fellowship of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, was the best place to find out how to be sober. Slow but sure, progress and never perfect. How to be sober one day at a time. And it was excruciating in early days, fighting with myself over shall I or shan't I pick up a drink. So some people get it straight away and think, I don't need to drink ever again and life will get better. But my head, my thinking head, kept on saying, willpower, I can overcome this on my own. And every time I tried to overcome it on my own, I was caught again in the trap of self-will, run riot, pushing myself into a corner, and then finding there was no way out except to drink. So fellowship helped me. So how did it do that? Very simple, really. I kept on going to meetings long enough to find out what sobriety might be like, by listening to other people, their experience, strength and hope of recovery, and how they were doing. And I thought they were a bunch of liars to start with, simply because I couldn't believe anybody could be sober and stay sober for more than a day, well, for years in fact, in many cases. So what is the Fellowship of AA? Well, I share the AA preamble, the meeting starter, if you like, which you will hear at the beginning of every meeting of AA, and I read it out, I don't recite it. And the reason I read it out, it slows me down to now, it slows me down into the moment of now, the only one which matters, where life is happening. And all those phrases we might have heard from the past, like life is happening, it is, only now. It's not about history or the future, which is fantasy often, it's about what's happening now. So what is AA? Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. So we all go into AA with our own ideas, faith, beliefs, politics, you name it, we have it, affiliations. But the fellowship is only there for one reason, to help people with a desire to stop drinking and help each other to stay sober. So not so bad really. It's not affiliated to anything, but we all are. So we keep we keep our beliefs and politics to ourselves as much as possible, but they will spill out, and the answer is not to try and push our beliefs and faiths on other people. Each person has their own outlook, and that's part of the programme. We are unique, authentic people, which is why I never speak for AA, never can, never will. It is full of unique, authentic people who speak where they will about their recovery, if asked, or just sharing generally about how their day is going. And the fellowship is one day strong. It's one day strong. It's not there for long sobriety. It's about one day, and as a result we get long sobriety. So the impact, if you like, is to be sober today, and then it sort of compounds itself into long sobriety. So we keep on getting more experience, strength and hope of living, hearing the problems and hearing the solutions of other people and what they've been through. And what a wonderful place that it is, because it's anonymous, because we can find out who we really are. And I was speaking to my auntie over Christmas, and I haven't seen her for some time, but I said, you know, I'm finding out who I am on a daily basis. And she said, well, I'm X amount of years old, and I'm still trying to find out who I am. And I said, Auntie, all we will know is we'll know a little bit more about who we are by the end of the day. And she laughed, because it's true. We are learning who we are on a daily basis. Here I share from this book, Daily Reflections, which is 365 pages of information and experience, strength and hope, all about recovery and the 12 steps, which are for personal development or our personal well-being, and the 12 traditions, which are about unity, service and recovery and fellowship. And the 12th tradition is all about anonymity, and it's very important to mention it, and also the daily reflection is as well. So I'm going to be talking about this book a bit later and reading the 12th tradition out and adding my bits in, or rather hopefully making sense of it for me, and maybe it makes some sense for other people as well. But I'm not here to say this is the right way or the wrong way. We learn what is the right way for ourselves. So December 30th, anonymity in the Daily Reflections book. It says here, or reads here, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. So the whole programme is about principles of learning, getting experience, strength and hope of what works. And it's not about personalities. It's not about one person standing up and saying this is the way forward. We all take a lead for ourselves in recovery. It's all about freedom of choice, freedom of action today. And the first freedom for me is sober. Do you hear those bottles going? I live next to the Bibendum restaurant, a very famous restaurant in London, and the empties that come out of there every night into the bins, and then they turf them out into a great big truck. Real life. Anyway, coming back to the tradition. Tradition 12 became important early in my sobriety, and along with the 12 steps, it continues to be a must in my recovery. I became aware after I joined the fellowship that I had personality problems, so that when I first heard it, the tradition's message was very clear. There exists an immediate way for me to face with others my alcoholism and attendant anger, defensiveness, offensiveness. I saw Tradition 12 as being a great ego deflator, principles before personalities. So it's not about what one person says which counts, it's about what everybody says which counts. The principles of the programme are made up from the wealth of experience, strength and hope of those in the fellowship, not one person. So an ego deflator means simply we are all the same size in fellowship. We have an equal right to speak and vote our way along. It relived my anger and gave me a chance to utilise the principles of the programme. All of the steps and this particular tradition have guided me over the decades of continuous sobriety. I am grateful to those who were here when I needed them. And it's the greater number always. I mean, the most important thing I learned in early sobriety If I were to lean on one person, say in my family, I could pull them down with me, not necessarily into drinking, but then I might go find somebody else who was drinking, and we would stay and remain inebriated for long periods. So family, I mean, if I couldn't stop myself on my own, what chance did family have, or one person in the family, or a partner? And I always picked girls who liked to drink as well as I did, which is very bad news for both of us. And these days I know it's the great number, the many voices of AA which keep me sober a day at a time. It's not just one voice. It's not just a sponsor in my life which sets the rules of how I live my recovery or how I learn sobriety. I need to learn it from everyone. And the way I do that, there are so many different types of meeting. There are newcomers meetings, meeting about the steps, meetings about the traditions, meetings. And my first real attempt at sobriety meant doing 90 meetings in 90 days. That is what is suggested. But I was so frightened of going into a pub or a bar or just going into a market and buying some booze. Spirits, please. I wanted to be fixed quickly in those days. So wine and beer was no good to me. I just wanted out of it, oblivion. I needed to go to lots of meetings. So I would go to 1 meeting or 4 meetings a day. And I was homeless and living in a real, well, I was street homeless, then was put into a homeless place. God, what a place that was. I had mice, so I didn't have rats. But there were rats in the basement. They were not human rats, they were real rats, big ones. And it was quite sordid and horrible. But I went to meetings and ate tea and biscuits because I had no money, or very little money. All my money went on what I was given going somewhere else. Why am I saying this? Because it's so important. You know, it's not easy to get into recovery, and you don't have to go all the way down to rock bottom where I went, to places of revival in intensive care. Rock bottom is as bad as it need get before we realise that we need some help. And where do you get help? From those who know. I know a fellowship that can, but if I rely on one person in fellowship, it's no good, and they can't have it. They can't have it like that. We spread the load. So tradition 12 in this book, which is really important, and you know, principles before personality means that we're all leveled. So it's one personality, one person speaking out. It's not going to be enough. Seeing my video is never going to be enough. I know that because I have to go to meetings, and if I didn't go to meetings, I'd be mad as a hatter again. So step 12 in this book, sorry, no, tradition 12. Read it again. Yeah, tradition 12, this book. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles, that is, what works, before personalities. We don't have leaders in AA, we have trusted servants. So ego deflation, even if we did think we were right, which is an ego thing, over another person's opinion, we've got to realise that their opinion is working for them, or their freedom of choice is working for them because they're still sober. And what we do with our lives once we've got freedom of choice is really down to us, not down to a single person telling you what to do. And that's the reason why it's anarchic democracy, which is all about tradition 1. The spiritual substance of anonymity is sacrifice. Because AA's 12 traditions repeatedly ask us to give up personal desires for the common good. In other words, common good, about good conscience. It's what the group, a fellowship meeting is a group. It's what the group decide as a whole which is right for them, as long as they keep it within the bounds of a desire to stop drinking and they're not affiliated to anything else. We realise that sacrificial spirit, well symbolised by anonymity, is the foundation of them all. It is AA's proved willingness to make these sacrifices that gives people their high confidence in our future. And I don't think it's a symbol of anonymity which counts. It's actually the practice of anonymity within the rooms and the meetings of AA and the fellowship. But my video is not in the rooms or in the fellowship. I don't represent the fellowship, never can, never will. So I'm just saying what I know about my experience, strength and hope. But in the beginning, anonymity was not born of confidence. It was the child of our early fears. Our first nameless groups of alcoholics were secret societies. All the stigma attached to being an alcoholic, and it's still there to an extent, because if you haven't got the malady, you can't understand why people can't stop. And those people who can't stop don't want it, and don't want to share that they've got it, because there's guilt and shame because of the stigma. So that's why it happened. Our first nameless groups were secret societies. New prospects could find us only through a few trusted friends. The bare hint of publicity, even for our work, shocked us. Though ex-drinkers, we still thought we had to hide from public distrust and contempt. And even these days, when you walk past a drunk in the street, or a homeless drunk in the street who's out of it, or somebody strung out on drugs, and their bones are poking through because they've got some sort of skin-eating or flesh-eating disease, and somehow they're still alive and the hospitals won't take them, what do? Well, I don't ignore them. I don't know what to do. And when I see people like that and I talk to them, I try and find out how I can help them. And most often I can't. But it doesn't stop me doing something. The bare hint of distrust and contempt. When the big book appeared in 1939, we called it Alcoholics Anonymous. Its foreword made this revealing statement: it is important that we remain anonymous because we are too few, at present, to handle the overwhelming number of personal appeals which may result from this publication. In other words, we would be overrun and overwhelmed by people saying, "Come on, fix me." And what we learn in sobriety is there is no fix. There is sober today, which leads to freedom of choice. Being mostly business or professional folk, we could not well carry on our occupations in such an event. Between these lines, it is easy to read our fear that large numbers of incoming people might break our anonymity wide open, but more often it would just break us down, with overwhelming numbers, desiring sobriety, but not actually desiring it, wanting it. Fix me. As the AA groups multiplied, so did anonymity problems. Enthused over the spectacular recovery of a brother alcoholic, we'd sometimes discuss those intimate and harrowing aspects of his case, meant for his sponsors' ears alone. In other words, it's called gossip. And gossip kills people. The aggrieved victim would then rightly declare that this trust had been broken. And if you break a trust, what happens? I mean, if you cheat on somebody, your partner, what happens? I mean, I've only ever done it once, really, cheated. And I owned up and confessed, and it was horrible, because it put me in a horrible place, and it put her in a horrible place too. And she was the one who said, "Life's too short." But then it all fell apart anyway, because I couldn't cope with my guilt. I think she forgave me. Actually, she said she did. But I couldn't cope with my guilt, which is a good reason to drink. And that's how it goes when we break trusts, and why anonymity is so important as an understanding between people in fellowship. We don't talk about other people, but we do. The aggrieved victim would then rightly declare that his trust had been broken. When such stories got into circulation outside of AA, the loss of confidence in our anonymity promise was severe. It frequently turned people from us. Clearly, every AA member's name, the story too, had to be confidential if he wished. Personal choice. This was our first lesson in the practical application of anonymity. So if a person desires anonymity in all forms, so be it. And we need honour and trust to judgment of that person about their anonymity. It's not for us to break it or challenge it. With characteristic intemperance, however, some of our newcomers cared not at all for secrecy. They wanted to shout AA from the housetops, and did. Alcoholics, barely dry, rushed about bright-eyed, buttonholing anyone who would listen to their stories. Others hurried to place themselves before microphones and cameras. Sometimes they got distressingly drunk and let their groups down with a bang. They had changed from AA members into AA show-offs. Now, you've got to be careful here, because an AA show-off can be completely anonymous and an arsehole. In other words, they go around shouting from the rooftops that anonymity, you can break anonymity and it's breaking a rule. No such truth. The 12 steps and 12 traditions are principles above personality, and a person can choose to be anonymous or not. But the impact is this. What is the impact? If somebody newly sober runs around saying, I'm in AA, most people who know and love them say, thank God for that. But if they're famous, what do the press do? They vilify them, A, for going into a program of recovery, and then look for who else might be in there as well who's famous. Well, that still happens. But that's life. You know, we have to say to ourselves that in the long run, a person either stays sober or they don't stay sober. And are there really show-offs in early recovery? They have a strong desire for sobriety, which says, I'm trying to be sober. Look at me, I'm trying to be sober. But in the end, it does come back down to trudging that happy road of destiny. This phenomenon of contrast really set us thinking. Squarely before us was the question, how anonymous should an AA member be? Our growth made it plain that we couldn't be a secret society, but if it was equally plain that we couldn't be a vaudeville circuit either, the charting of a safe path between these extremes took a long time. As a rule, the average newcomer wanted his family to know immediately what he was trying to do. He also, and some of them don't actually, some people just do not tell their family what's going on, and that's their choice. It needs to be that way. He also wanted to tell others who tried to help him, his doctor, his minister, and close friends. Some do, some don't. And as he gained confidence, he felt it right to explain his new way of life to his employer and business associates. Well, hardly likely in this current climate, because shame and guilt is still there, and the stigma. But you can't fire a person for being an alcoholic. You can fire a person for being incompetent, and you can't fire a person for being in recovery. You can fire them for being incompetent. When opportunities to be helpful came along, he found he could talk easily about AA to almost anyone. These quiet disclosures helped him to lose his fear of the alcoholic stigma, and only we can actually get rid of the stigma about ourselves by ourselves, and spread the news of AA existence in his community. Many a new man and woman came to AA because of such conversations. Though not in the strict letter of anonymity, such communications were well within its spirit. Well, it didn't happen that way for me. Somebody picked up a telephone and shoved me through the door, so we'll get there somehow. But it became apparent that such word-of-mouth method was too limited. Our work, as such, needed to be publicised. The AA groups would have to reach quickly as many despairing alcoholics as they could. And actually, we are better off. The greater the number of alcoholics in recovery, the better it is, because we can all lean on each other in our lifeboat, in the groups and meetings of AA. Consequently, many groups began to hold meetings which were open to interested friends and the public, and we still have open meetings and closed meetings, so that the average citizen could see for himself just what AA was all about. The response to these meetings was warmly sympathetic. Only if you have a problem do you go anywhere near an AA meeting, and only if you have a problem do you actually consider it, and only if you are interested in helping somebody do you really care about AA, is what I found. But that's just me. Soon groups began to receive requests for AA speakers to appear before civic organisations, church groups and medical societies, and many people in the fellowship still go into prisons and do all that stuff as well. I've only done very, very limited prison service, but it was a shock to the system that people could actually work the programme in prison. Provided anonymity was maintained on these platforms and reporters present were cautioned against use of names or pictures, the result was fine. Then came our first few excursions into major publicity, which were breathtaking. Cleveland's plain dealer articles about us ran that town's membership from a few into hundreds overnight. The news stories of Mr. Rockefeller's dinner for the Alcoholics Anonymous helped double our total membership in a year's time. Jack Alexander's famous Saturday Evening Post piece made AA a national institution. Such tributes as these brought opportunities for still more recognition. Other newspapers and magazines wanted AA stories. Film companies wanted to photograph us. Radio and finally television besieged us with requests for appearances. What should we do? Do you know what? I've had no requests, or rather, I've had a few, but I've said no, because it's not about me. But, you know, that's overplaying it, in my view, just because people aren't that interested unless you are an alcoholic or you have a problem with somebody who is. As the tide offering top public approval swept in, we realised that it could do us incalculable good or great harm. I'm sighing because, you know, nobody knows about AA unless you need it. And that's just an opinion of somebody who is an alcoholic. Nobody out there is interested in whether I'm an alcoholic unless it's getting on their nerves. And probably it does for some people in AA. We simply couldn't afford to take the chance of letting self-appointed members present themselves as messiahs representing AA before the whole public, and which is why I say I'm not AA. Never can, never will be. But you need to know what it's about, otherwise why go there? The promoter instinct in us might be our undoing. If even one publicly got drunk or was lured into using AA's name for his own purposes, the damage might be irreparable. In other words, we break a trust of maybe doing harm to our fellows in the programme. So if one got publicly drunk, what would I do? I would declare my drunkenness immediately, as I've had a slip in the rooms of AA, and if I were open, honest and willing to share the truth of me, which I am, I'd tell you out there too, that I would have a slip, and if I did, I would tell you, because there's no point in hiding it. Life experiences are hard enough, and I can't afford to cover up. So it's an inverted snobbery or inverted ego if we're not careful. We've got to know what we're talking about here. Truth, open, honest, willing living. At this altitude, press, radio and films and television, anonymity, 100% anonymity was the only possible answer. Here, principles would have to come before personalities. Now, actually, principles before personalities means that principles count, the principles of the 12 steps and 12 traditions, all with an equal voice within fellowship. Personalities, there will always be personalities in fellowship. I've met them, and they're strong and they're wonderful, but they're only one voice of many. And that's what I'm trying to get home. Nobody tells anybody else what to do in AA. These experiences taught us that anonymity is real humility at work. It is when we're talking about others. We don't talk about others, but anonymity to find the truth of who we are, that's sacrosanct, because truth is the absolute spiritual connection. Truth as it is, not what I want it to be, not hiding behind a door which says keep out of my private space. Have I got any privates? I don't know. You seem to know it all here. It is an all-pervading spiritual quality which today keynotes AA life everywhere. Moved by the spirit of anonymity, we try to give up our natural desires for personal distinction as AA members, both among fellow alcoholics and before the general public. And for me, the general public don't give a damn, quite frankly, unless you have something personally to do with them. As we lay aside these very human aspirations, we believe that each of us takes part in the weaving of a protective mantle. And the protective mantle is anonymity within fellowship. What people do with their lives remains their own personal business. And don't forget, principles and suggestions, not rules. So you can't violate a principle unless you are absolutely rule-bound by it. There are no rules in fellowship. That is the whole point of it. We believe that each of us takes part in the weaving of a protective mantle which covers our whole society, and under which we may grow and work in unity. So key, fellowship, and under which we may grow and work in unity. So within fellowship, the anonymity, levelling, ego-deflating as it is, means we're all level, And from the first person who comes in, or rather the person who comes in on their first moment, through to the person who's been there for 50 odd years sober, we're all equal. No one bigger or smaller. That's so important. And if an ego-driven old-timer starts to spout on, they become a bleeding deacon. Look at tradition 2. I will. We are sure that humility is the ability to keep on learning, even if we have to do it over and over again to get the message. Expressed by anonymity, which is levelling, is the greatest safeguard that Alcoholics Anonymous can ever have. And that's the most important thing. The fellowship is a fellowship of equals. Anonymity provides a cloak to find our truth, and truth is our spiritual foundation for living. I hope it is anyway, because if it's not, I've been wasting my time for several years. But I tell you what, how am I feeling this morning? I feel okay. It's been a difficult few days. Going out with the family and overdoing it in terms of just getting about has really set me back. Physically, but emotionally and spiritually. Emotionally I feel okay, reasonable, but I can't move too far. And spiritually I feel in the moment of now. So in the moment of now, the serenity prayer to God or good conscience, as you choose to believe, and it is a personal understanding of faith, courage, which is always important when exhorting a meditation or reflection or prayer to a power greater than us, and that is to the universe in my case, which I choose to call God. So to God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, for me, is just for today, because with humility I hope I keep on learning.